The Republican judge who struck it down the first time, and you will see Republican and Democratic judges the second time. This doesn't make America safer, and it doesn't make our democracy any better.
Tom Perez, who can't explain why what Donald Trump did was unconstitutional, he just doesn't like it. Do you see that? And no, this wasn't a Republican judge involved. What he's trying to argue is that there was a person on the appeals court in the Ninth Circuit who was actually a Republican appointee, and he's trying to argue that somehow that makes the ruling bipartisan. It's crazy. Again, just more evidence that the left, they don't have anything to back up their argument on this. Before I forget here real quick, Liz, let's get to the short list, please.
The short list brought to you by Bill Thomas Camper Sales. Find your camper at btcamper.com.
The senator from Kentucky is now working for Vladimir Putin.
Well, I think he makes a really, really strong case, for term limits. I think maybe he's past his prime. I think maybe he's gotten a little bit unhinged.
This was done by a judge for political reasons, do you know? This ruling makes us look weak.
Rand Paul and John McCain mixing it up. How about that? I'm telling you what, that's good stuff. Already, by the way, on the NCAA tournament, already potentially an upset in the works here with the University of North Carolina, Wilmington battling it out. They were leading just a minute ago against Virginia. So I'm telling you what, it's going to be a great tournament. I'm fired up for it. I just have to say that. All right. So I want to get to my guest right now, Hans von Spakovsky with the Heritage Foundation. Hans, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Not much to talk about these days, right?
Hey, have we been any busier any time in the past few years in comparison to since Donald Trump became president?
No kidding. I'm telling you what, every day there's something new. I said that when I heard yesterday that they were waiting for a decision by a judge, I fully expected they would try to temporarily halt this, and I wasn't disappointed. What were you expecting this judgment by this judge?
Oh yeah. In fact, there was a similar decision by a federal judge in Maryland. I'm sure it doesn't surprise you to hear that both of them are Obama appointees to the court. I mean, this is the revenge of the Obama political appointees who remain in office, unfortunately, and will stay in office because they're federal judges.
I attended an event in the last 6 months where I was asked to MC an event with a federal judge who happened to be there. The audience was giving questions, and one of the questions was about political bias on the part of judges, because it was still in the middle of the election, and this federal judge, it was a female judge, I'm not going to name her here, but she scoffed at the fact that politics would play a role in any judge's decision. And maybe that's just what she has to say officially, but I'm not quite sure how you can look at a decision like this, where a judge goes back to a political statement during a campaign to base their decision on whether or not an action is constitutional.
Oh, look, I agree with you, and that judge is just completely wrong. I mean, you can see the political bias in many decisions, and again, the Hawaii judge, 43 pages, not once anywhere in this opinion is there a detailed discussion of the federal immigration statute on which the president based his executive action, and it gives him authority to do it. Nowhere in the entire order. He basically avoids talking about the relevant provision of the law that gives the president the power to do it. What is that other than politics? Because he wanted to get to a particular conclusion, and if he had to talk about the law that's in the case, he wouldn't be able to do that.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. I listened to Alan Dershowitz yesterday, who certainly doesn't always come down on the conservative side of the spectrum, who pointed out that the very fact that the judge mentioned the campaign comments, and he said if you carry that to its logical conclusion, his argument is, had Barack Obama made this executive order, it would be constitutional because it was Donald Trump who made this executive order. It's not constitutional. He said, I do not see a situation where that stands up in the Supreme Court.
Oh, no, I don't either, particularly when, look, talk about legislation passed by Congress. When courts look at that, they're supposed to look at the text. What does it say? The only time you go to legislative history or perhaps look at the debates that occurred is if the law is unclear. You can't understand what it's saying. That's certainly not the case with these revised executive order. It's crystal clear what it says, what it does, and I think it is clearly within the power of the president to do what he did.
Yeah. Do you think he has more luck on appeal? I guess my question now is a technical question. Does he have to appeal this since the ruling came from the Ninth Circuit? Does it automatically have to go to the same Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that turned him down the first time? The same 9 or 10 judges are going to look at this as well?
Well, it was actually a 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit that looked at the original Washington State order. I'm not sure whether it'll go to the same panel depends on whether the court decides it's related enough to the earlier case that it should be sent to the same panel. I don't expect him to get a good decision out of the Ninth Circuit either. As you know, it's an extremely liberal court. I think what they're looking forward to is getting this eventually to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they don't want it to get there before Neil Gorsuch is confirmed to replace Justice Scalia.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should probably remind people of that time frame. His hearings are scheduled to start next Monday, the 20th, and the plan is to try to get a final vote by early April, maybe the second week of April, right?
Right, and that actually hopefully will be enough time before this gets up there, and then hopefully they'll have at least 5 justices who will uphold what President Trump is trying to do.
Yeah, it would be kind of frustrating, I think, and you could hear it in the president's voice last night at that rally when he suggested, well, I wanted to just go back to the first one and fight it out. That's what I wanted to do. So it sounds like he had a little dispute with maybe his attorney general and some other folks who recommended rewriting it to begin with.
Yeah, but I think he's in a better position with this second order. Look, it's not really that much different. It's just that this revised order explains, for example, why they picked the 6 countries. And look, that's another thing that shows how just nutty this whole decision is and these fights against it. All these courts keep saying, oh, this is a Muslim ban. It's intended to discriminate. That is just a foolish claim because, look, if they wanted to discriminate against Muslims, why didn't they pick the 50 countries in the world that have a majority Muslim population? No, they only picked 6. And those 6 were picked not because of their religion. They were picked because 3 of them are labeled by the U.S. State Department as official state sponsors of terrorism, and the other 3 are countries of concern because of their involvement with terrorism. Terrorism is at the root of this. It has nothing to do with wanting to discriminate against Muslims.
Hans, I know I didn't prepare ahead of time to discuss this with you, so if it's something you can't comment on, I'll understand completely. On a separate subject of the House investigative committees saying that they need answers from the Department of Justice, do those House committees on the wiretapping issue, do those House committees have subpoena power over the Department of Justice? Can they go to a court or can they issue subpoenas to get classified information from investigations that are potentially ongoing from the Department of Justice?
Well, they do have subpoena power, but guess who it is that enforces their subpoenas?
The Attorney General.
The U.S. Justice Department.
Yeah.
They have a very tough time if the Justice Department does not want to give them documents. I mean, just think back to Operation Fast and Furious, which Eric Holder refused to turn documents over on, and they couldn't get those documents out of the department.
Wow. Well, I sense their frustration. Even I heard the president using the semantics argument yesterday, but I think that I have a hard time. I'm not asking you to comment on the politics of it. I have a hard time believing that he would go so far as to suggest something like that if he didn't know that there was some evidence somewhere, but I guess that remains to be seen. Listen, I know you've got other stuff you've got to get to. Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation, thanks for your time.
Sure, anytime.
Have a great day. Thank you. And go to heritage.org to read more on Hans' thoughts on this and other issues. They've got a great legal department there at Heritage that really tears into some of these issues. They